10% of the cost of your...
This is where cloverleaf tuna comes from. There are other tunas, but this one, cloverleaf white tuna, is oceans apart in taste. Just look. Notice the delicate color and firm texture of cloverleaf's white meat tuna. It looks as delicious as it tastes. Truly, tuna fit for a king.
Cloverleaf white tuna, flaked or solid. It's the best catch of all.
Ever wonder why all kinds of people take X-Lax? Because X-Lax is a gentle, effective way to relieve irregularity. Chocolated X-Lax contains a recognized medicinal ingredient that works overnight to help restore regularity by morning. Good-tasting chocolated X-Lax for gentle, effective overnight relief. You can trust it. It's from the X-Lax Company.
You can make the sun shine all over British Columbia this year in the Kinwin Lottery for the physically disabled. There's a $100,000 first prize, and for the first time in Canada, a daily draw. You can win $100 every day, Monday through Friday, from April 2nd to June 29th. Kinwin is the Good Times Lottery. Kinwin means good times for you and better times for the physically disabled of British Columbia.
Today's winner, Mrs. Howard Muick in Aldergrove.
Good morning. It's your decision on Thursday in the provincial election. This morning, Premier Bennett. Running? Is he running scared? Are things going bad? What's his last-minute pitch to you, to my particularly provocative questions this morning? We'll find out after this commercial break.
Hmm? 23rd, everything's all...
Mr. Bennett, you've been Premier of this province since your unexpected win over the NDP in December 1975.
I don't think it was unexpected, but...
Is the question that's worrying you today is, do the people trust Bill Bennett? The last time he was elected, up went the sales tax, up went the ICBC rates, up went the ferry rates, and then down they came, up and down. Now you're campaigning on a 4% sales tax budget. Do the people trust you?
Well, I think the people know that in the last government, spending was out of control, and they increased spending at 27% every year, each and every year. Their budget was out of control, as I say. That's why they called the election in such a panic in 1975. They didn't want that information to get out. The public suspected it, but they didn't know it for sure. And we inherited the mess, and I wasn't going to cut social services. I wasn't going to close hospitals. We needed a tax base to do it. I didn't want to add to the tremendous deficit they had already left us, so we took a course, a responsible course of bringing spending into line, of having enough revenues to cover all our social services, and in the 3 years since, the 3 budget years since, there have been tax cuts each and every year, and we've had a gradual tax cut, not just now.
You must admit, though, that that particular flurry of up and down gave you a bad time which still haunts you.
I don't think so. I think
and
you know, Jack, it doesn't haunt me, because I think people want governments that are accountable, that lay it on the line, show them what services they can give and what the cost is. I think what they don't trust is politicians that make a lot of promises and then hide when they get into financial trouble.
But even you, with your careful business management, as you would tell me, suddenly shake the municipalities and everybody else when you have your freeze on hospitals, your 5%, your freeze in municipalities, your freeze in school districts.
Jack, no, nonsense. We were at a First Minister's Conference on the economy where all governments agreed to restrain spending. The country was in dangerous shape economically because spending by all governments, all public bodies, had risen to 40% of the gross national product, and our projections showed that by 1980, just next year, without corrective measure, it would have been 45%, the taxation levels and the resulting, in some parts, so the way other governments finance of debt structure would have destroyed this country. Now, what we all agreed to do was take a more responsible course, and we have. British Columbia has done the best job of fighting inflation and containing spending. We have the lowest rate of increase of government spending in the 3.5 years we've been government of all governments.
That will continue to be your policy if elected.
Our policy...
You're not going to panic and lift all your freezes like you did in the hospital freeze when you pushed
No, it's not
a
a panic. What we asked them to do was restrain their spending. What we also said at the same time, Jack, was that we wouldn't irresponsibly make the freeze so rigid that essential things and expenses that they couldn't control or were beyond their control would allow them to suffer in the care, say in the case of the hospitals, the care they gave. Now, that's all we said. In the case of the municipalities, the freeze was a little tougher because 2 years earlier, we'd given them revenue sharing. And we give them every year then a specific share of the resource revenue and the taxation revenues of this province. We pay them taxes on government buildings now. They've had millions more from the provincial budget, and in the minister's view, some of them hadn't been passing this along in the way of tax reductions, and we're letting taxes increase.
Spend their surpluses.
That's right, and just like we do. We bring ours back every year. Now, somebody's criticized us for having surpluses, but have you ever tried to spend a deficit?
Now, do you accept any of the criticism that hospital care has suffered because of your restraint policies?
That's nonsense.
Have you come across any case where somebody has in fact suffered?
No, and...
have many people been laid off?
No, there are 18% more people working directly in hospitals today than were working in 1975 when we came. The hospitals in British Columbia, in the 3.5 years we have been government, are now getting approximately 50% more money from the provincial government than they were getting under the NDP. Add to this 11,000 additional workers providing health care in our extended and home care program, a program that we brought in when other governments across this country have been unable to do it. Put that together, and you have the finest health care system in this country.
Medevac is quite curious. You brought in the NDP and the previous social credits, long promised long-term care, right?
You
also kept the BC Petroleum Corporation, the land freeze, pharmacare by and large, and gain. Matter of fact, quite surprising that the Free Enterprise government kept all these NDP things. They were all good things.
You're giving the NDP credit for social services in which British Columbia has always led the way, and our party has been a leader. Their MINCOM was merely an extension of the former social credit government's supplementary provincial adjustment to pensions. Our gain is an extension of that program again as we deal in more groups. We've lowered the age to 55.
But the BC Petroleum Corporation were all granted was a good tax gathering
That's what
authority.
it is. It's a tax gathering authority. It's not a crown corporation, as Dave Barrett has said. It's just a good tax gathering vehicle. It's convenient to have. We collect taxes in a number of ways, and it works. Why would I dismantle it if it works?
One thing Barrett said to me yesterday, and everybody gets confused on this. It's a simple question. Let's get it out of the way. On gain for seniors who are not in full receipt of the federal monies, is there going to be a COLA on gain for the younger years?
In gain, it's in the legislation. It's passed. It hasn't been proclaimed, and it will be.
When will you proclaim it?
It will be proclaimed as the government can afford to do it. But it's in the legislation. We had a COLA. We had a cost of living increase in the legislation when we introduced gain.
There are many confusing charges that you are putting into general revenue, money which comes from Ottawa for certain categories of the younger seniors.
That's nonsense.
That's not true.
That's not true.
It's in your legislation of a gain for COLA, which you will proclaim. You tell me when you can afford it.
That's right. We have.
When will that be?
That will be when we're re-elected, and we can continue the type of economic growth in our resource industries in this province, additional processing. The things that are taking place now that you see will mean an expanded economy. The government gets its share, not by being vindictive with restrictive taxation like the NDP did, but encouragement and then receiving the rewards of fair taxation.
Talking about taxation, Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
You set up the BC Assessment Authority. You revised the BC Assessment Authority, did you not?
No, it was there.
Okay, you came to actual value taxation, did you not?
Yes, the assessment authority was there.
And you gave the municipalities 4 options. I am reliably informed that the net effect of your policies in taxation have been to lighten the load considerably in industry by some 30% in one municipality and increase it on the homeowners by a substantial amount.
If you had...
Is that not correct?
No. It will vary from area to area, but all that did was mean that assessments, rather than being unequal, so that your home, in this case, was overassessed and you were paying too much, and down the road your neighbor's home was underassessed and they were paying too little, was that at least you would be assessed on the same value. And all it did is provide these same rules for everyone. Now the result...
Did it not lighten the load on industry, in effect? I have a case of the Saskatchewan wheat pool in North Vancouver, where in 77 they paid 800,000 and in 78 they only paid 6.
Well, depending on the value of the assessment. That has to do with the local people, and the tax bill, Jack, is just assessment times mill rate. You know, that's the final dollar you spend.
You tell me there is no such policy deliberately to move the weight onto the homeowner?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, our policies have been to lighten taxes on homeowners, and that's why we have continued very extensively for our seniors and handicapped particularly, and for all others, the homeowner grant.
Except for the balance of school costs. Has it not gone up with you, where the mill rate has been increased on the property owner and the government proportion down?
You're talking about education?
Education costs.
Education costs have gone up. This year they'll go down substantially, because what we've done to lighten the load on the property owner, and this is all property owners in this province, is we've taken the total cost of all the colleges in this province that had their operating paid out of local taxes. The government of British Columbia now pays that total cost, and that's a burden we've taken off.
You say that will balance it, will bring down the net cost to the homeowner?
Certainly, along with the $100 increase in the homeowner grant, they're going to be paying much less for education this year. When their budgets are finalized at the end of June, I think with other measures that have taken place and the budget that we presented over and above the colleges, I think there'll be a substantial reduction for everyone.
Now, Mr. Van der Zam keeps making funny noises, and he must make them with your authority. Sir, if and when your government is elected, do you plan a major change, perhaps the removal of certain regional boards, and perhaps the downgrading, some people would like to see it, of school board authorities? Have you any basic plans?
The government has not developed a plan. What we have had is 2 things in trying to rationalize the overlap of government in this province and to assess regional districts. We had the committee that went throughout the province. We now are studying their recommendations and doing a departmental study of the way we can provide better government with less restriction and at less cost to the people. No conclusions have been reached, and to look at one of the things that was put into evidence, so, that people made representation, and to look at what other governments are doing, say Alberta or elsewhere, is not to say we're doing it. It's one of the options that has been put forward at all those hearings.
Many people, Mr. Bennett, would be delighted to see you cut down the numbers of government levels that have appeared in the province.
What we want to do...
Might be a good thing to wipe out regional boards.
What we're going to do is rationalize government so that you're going to have better government, perhaps a little less government. That's what may come out.
Might be a good thing to centralize.
That would be a good thing.
To centralize education, eh?
Oh, I don't know. I like the idea. I had 4 sons in school. Our family would like the opportunity to have a closer opportunity to deal with the education of children.
One disappointment, if Mr. Bennett is correct, Mr. Bennett, he said to me yesterday that since you took over, you were telling me about the increased 11,000 additional workers in hospitals. Your civil service has gone up from 39 to 43,000.
No, you're talking about what's considered permanent public service. What we did is when the community resource boards were brought into the provincial government service, certain jobs had to be then that were already being paid out of the public purse that were hidden from the rolls. When he became government, were added in. We also found a lot of people that have been working in government for 15 or 20 years that were called temporary, that were permanent. So we did away with hiding them as temporary employees, and they're in the permanent force. Actually, we've contained, better than any government in Canada, the growth in the numbers of people.
Mr. Barrett says here yesterday that if elected, he will pattern the province with a covey of community resource boards. What do you say to that?
I say we're going to continue the way we are. We're not going to have a lot of middlemen. We want the money to get to those in need.
But what did you think of his community resource boards?
I didn't think they were working.
Did you think they were... you see, I'm trying to get you to tell me how bad the NDP was, sir, and you won't do that.
Everybody knows how bad they were. What I'm trying to say is, what I'm trying to talk about this morning, Jack, is about what's happening and the good things that are happening and what we will continue to make happen in this province. I don't have to keep reminding the people about the NDP and their sorry record.
In one word, what was their record?
It was disaster.
Webster and Premier Bennett after this break. What's the state of the Transit Authority now? Did you say...
UTA? Well, it's still there. They're waiting to get some agreement with the various areas.
Diddly, 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 diddly.
I remember when I used to do interviews with your friend Wasserman.
Mr. Premier, would it surprise you to know that if elected, Barrett tells me he's not going to change your budget, he's going to keep your budget till the spring of next year?
He couldn't afford, with their government management record, they couldn't afford to proceed with the tax cuts we've done. And they couldn't afford with some of the things, although they haven't published their policy in this record, and they've been running away from their philosophy. They've made a lot of catch-as-can promises out of their hip pocket. And they've also got some old commitments. And I don't know how he can maintain our budget when he, to a First Minister's conference, offered to give the constitutional rights to British Columbia's gas and oil lands to Ottawa if they would take over.
Nationalize the industry.
Yes, take over all the processing. Now I've got a copy of that here. Now you can just read it because it's very clear in what he said. Now you just read it while I'm talking now.
Whose document is this?
That's the minutes from the meeting. That's the official record of the transcript of the meeting.
And who is speaking? Barrett speaking.
Yeah. Now what I want to say is this: that would lose to British Columbia about $400 million a year. Not only couldn't we proceed with the tax cuts, he would have to increase taxes substantially and or cut services. You can't have it all ways. You can't, he's going around announcing increased spending programs in all sorts of areas. In one area, he's offered to give away a major tax area, but not only that, a major development tool for this province.
In other words, Barrett speaking, I stated that BC would surrender the oil and natural gas rights granted to it by the Constitution if the Government of Canada resolved to assume control of all reserves and ownership, the means of production, transmission, processing, and distribution. Nationalize the industry.
That's right. And
was that why you used that unfortunate phrase, which I tried to get you to back away from?
If they want to run, they're trying to run away from the word socialism, and I don't want to get that. But anyhow, here's the point. Here's the point. The petroleum and gas industry is very important in our economic strategy in British Columbia. When we came to power, only 15 rigs were working in the Peace River, and British Columbia's natural gas reserves were on a decline at a time when everybody knew we needed this resource. Today, over 90 rigs are working. I'll give you some idea of what that means. In this year, we've got 203 producing gas wells, 64 oil wells in British Columbia. Now, our reserves now are being proven up, and we've got increased reserve. Now, this means we've got energy that we can provide for our own people. We can go ahead with the natural gas pipeline to Vancouver Island that was going to go ahead, which Dave Barrett and his members stopped when they became government in 1972.
You mean the pipeline which did not go across Lasqueti, the other route,
no,
Vancouver Island
listen,
route.
there were two proposals. Not a matter. There was two formal proposals and a number of options. They stopped all of them, not just one. They stopped them all.
Now he's promising a gas line to the island. But,
Sure.
but
After we say we could do it, after we've got the expiration, after we've increased the reserves, now he's coming along saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I stopped it, and I'll do what the Socreds are going to do." Well, we don't need him to stop it again. We're going to go proceed with it. Now, the second thing is, what those increase in rigs and is thousands of men working and additional people working to supply that industry. Well, that will be lost.
I'll accept your figures in that. You're making the point that if Barrett were the Premier, he would, under the Constitution, give them the right to take that if they nationalised everything.
Well, Jack, he made that statement at a conference in front of television, in front of everyone in the country.
I'm still disappointed you didn't back away from that unfortunate remark you used in your election night broadcast.
Oh, I've talked about socialization and on the provincial or federal level, and I'm not going to get caught up in semantics. Only those that are trying to duck from being socialists at all in front of an election, because you know the NDP.
But you know what happened that morning?
The only time
I was personally affronted by it.
You know, the only time they're socialists is after an election. Before an election, you know, they're just nice guys.
But if you backed away that morning, I'd have forgotten the whole issue. Well, you didn't mean what I thought you meant, did you?
No, not at all.
You withdraw that?
No, I don't withdraw it, because I didn't mean what you
Fair enough.
You get in one of those convoluted arguments. You didn't say what I thought you said, but I said you did it.
Let that go, sir.
All right, fine.
One of the attractions of Barrett's campaign right now, even though you'll tell me it contradicts his federal policy of, what's his name, Broadbent and Blakeney, who are busy hammering away at uranium development, Barrett is telling the people of BC, who are perhaps super sensitive to ecology and radiation hazards, get out. All nuclear mining, out, damn nuclear mining. Well, are you prepared to match that?
First of all, there's no nuclear. Number one, we're not going to have nuclear power in this province. We don't need it. The only time we were threatened with having to consider it as an option is when the Barrett government and the NDP, cut off the pipeline to Vancouver Island, did not proceed with the additional electrical capacity under the water to Vancouver Island. They have when we came to government, they had a predicted shortfall of energy that would have meant brownouts and blackouts and lost jobs all over Vancouver Island for industry. We told Hydro to get on with the job of providing additional hydro capacity. And we have had the Energy Board studying the route proposals to make a recommendation on how gas can be delivered. That's part of the resource. Now, and I say we do not need nuclear. We will not be faced with it. We would, because our government is prepared to take action on acceptable energy sources to make sure they're available.
Me, sir, that
now, if Barrett and his government, Jack, had been government when they opposed the two-river policy, and we're not going to allow the Peace River to go ahead, this province would be in a critical energy shortage today, and you might have, if they were still government, you might have them panicking doing these things. If you got governments with the nerve to get on with the job, which they didn't do, which we will never have to have nuclear power in this province, and as long as we are government, you won't.
Fair enough.
Now, when you get
say no nuclear power in British Columbia, no nuclear power plants in British Columbia, but up there around that territory.
Oh, they're not. Now I'll talk about uranium mining because it's in my area.
Right.
First of all, you've got a couple of low-grade, as I understand it, discoveries in which is free miners coming in. People are looking. I'm as concerned, in fact, more concerned than anyone. It's in my area. I don't want to see anything threatened, and that is why we called a public inquiry under Dr. Bates, who have the responsibility to hold inquiries. Now, we've put up money, government money, for advocacy groups to make their voice heard. I don't have that right to make those sort of snap decisions like Dave's saying out of my hip pocket. The public should know what is there, what they've got, and what they should be afraid of, and then the government will make a decision.
Are you paying the protesters to protest?
We're paying, not protesters.
The advocates.
Look, I'd say people like myself who might be concerned about what's there. I would like a chance, say, I'm using myself as an example, if I have knowledge of making a point of view, and I hope they do. Now, on that report, whatever it is, we will be cautious, and anything that appears to be negative, this government would not proceed.
Is there any nuclear mining now in BC?
You mean uranium mining?
Yeah,
no,
sorry, uranium mining.
Not at all.
Any exploration?
Yes, and Rafe Mayer has said that part of exploration, in his view, he's the environment minister, that may be disruptive if it's moving the soil, should cease while the inquiry is going on. But I've got to tell you, I get a kick out of the NDP. They use Saskatchewan when they want to use their successes, and they run away with them. when the NDP in Saskatchewan is the last government in recent times, after we've been afraid of uranium mining, to go ahead with wholesale uranium mining. Now, it's a characteristic of the New Democratic Party to be able to ride the coattails of Saskatchewan when it's convenient, and be holier than thou when it's convenient on the other side. But I'll tell you, it's this inconsistency in them that makes them less credible with the people every day.
Premier Bennett with Webster after this break. Perhaps the best demonstration in the difference of philosophy at a working person's level, Mr. Bennett, between you and Barrett, is the fact that yesterday on this program he said, yes, rent controls, we'll move them back up, we'll study the housing situations, when necessary we'll bring them back up from 300, perhaps to a little higher, perhaps to 350. Are you not dedicated to total removal of rent controls in due course?
Yes, we're removing them gradually. We say that the supply and the market factor is the best insurance of continuous building of supply and provision of accommodation, and that's always proven to be the way. I see in the book 1200 Days that the NDP themselves, when they were bearing their souls after their defeat, agreed that the very minister that brought it in didn't agree with it. And you've got all those sort of things. It's catchy, but it doesn't work. But what we would do, as we've done, is take it off the higher levels first. The last we would do is on the lower income area, or the people that have the more modest rents. But it is our positive policy to encourage more construction of rental accommodation, so you have a right of choice, and if you don't like this landlord, you move out to another one.
Now, in other words, you're saying rent control we will diminish, and he's saying rent controls will put up.
Oh, well, certainly that's their philosophy, more government control, and they do it in those areas, and they will do it in every other area. Give them another chance at government. And what the NDP started to do between 72 and 75 will be nothing compared to the areas of control they'll move in, not just rent, but on people's lives. And as they have to increase taxation to buy the companies or take over the companies they say they're going to own, because as socialists, naturally they're going to do that. They're going to leave the people with less and less money in their genes that they've earned, and the people will have less and less opportunity to carry out their own investments. I'm going to tell you, don't be fooled. They haven't changed their spots.
Oh, no.
All they've done is put on a cloak to cover them up till after the election.
You mean Mr. Barrett has kept on his jacket?
That's right.
No, but just by the way, he bought many operations which you're now selling. I mean, that's another classic one.
I'm
talking about BCRIC.
And I'm telling you, that's wrong. We're not selling it, we're giving it.
Well, you're giving it, but you can also buy shares in it.
No,
I'm putting it simply, Mr. Bennett.
Well, let me explain.
He bought a number of operations.
Let me tell you, yeah, and the people didn't ask him to buy them, and I say they belong in the private sector. One of the problems with the forest industry when we came to government is there was no major capital reinvestment. That was threatening the jobs and the security of the people that worked for McMillan Blodell or Crown Zellerback and others, because they were becoming less competitive. And they were worried because you had the government taking over parts of the industry. They were not only writing the rules, but they were the referee, and they also were going to be a player in the game. And there was no confidence in the industry. Now, we said that wouldn't happen. We have all, as government, we're going to be fair. So now we've got billions of dollars in capital investment, not just by the large, but the small. That means jobs for construction, secure jobs for the people in the forest industry in the future. Now, let me see. Now, they bought some. The major asset of BCRIC is the oil and gas lands, petroleum and gas lands. There are a number of companies. We've put them into a corporation.
Which have made a lot of money.
Just a second. No, they haven't. Now,
Can't sell.
No, it's...
Kootenai Forest Park.
They haven't made a lot of money. And very little has flowed through the government. I don't want to get into that part. I want to tell you, because you're misinformed, because you've probably just recently talked to Dave Barrett, who has been misinforming the people on BCRIC. Number one, we put them in a corporation. And we took for the value of them shares, 15 million shares. Now we're giving the people the shares. We're giving them, it is not a crown corporation. It will be a public company in the private sector. Just a second. We're giving them in their own hands what they own. Now they've got the company. They have an additional opportunity at a preferred price to harness their savings and stop being a lender and start to be a participant in ownership by putting additional money in their corporation so it can do several things. So it can carry out additional economic expansion in this province under BC ownership, their individual ownership, to make this province work and grow.
But let me put it to you simply. Pretend for a moment that I am for once a brutally cynical observer. And I don't
have to pretend.
Well, I don't particularly like the NDP putting into crown operations. Yeah. I'm glad you sold Panko Poultry, for instance.
Yeah, all right.
But at the same time, you are taking a crown-owned asset at a time when you call an election. And you are waiving these 5 free brick shares,
let me
which you must let me finish, sir. I'll give you a good shot on that.
All right.
You're waiving these 5 free shares, which I concede are worth money some way or another. And to me, sir, that and your lottery fund check handing out and your last-minute grants, 400,000 to the Orpheum and whatnot, makes me think, I went back to the good old days of, quote, bribing the voters.
Well, first of all, any time a government, first of all government business is collecting taxes and then providing programs. So anything you do, every time you build a hospital, you provide a little better health care. That could be considered bribing the voters, but that's why we're here. And we're here not only to do good management of those social services and to provide highways and to build transportation links and to bring a measure of stability, we're also here philosophically. And philosophically, I think this province can grow with an extension of individual ownership. The answer is not government ownership. Government ownership, once started, expands and expands, and as they need money to feed it, there's less money left in the private sector and individuals to make their own choices. I said we were doing it to end a trend in this country towards...
Not to bribe the voters.
No, just a second. Consolidation of ownership on one hand by big corporations through mergers and takeovers, and government on the other. The best protection for the people is to have individual ownership. BCRIC was passed in 1977, and the distribution plan having taken some time to get underway. But that legislation was debated and passed in 1977.
Wasn't planned for the election?
No.
What about an independent body for these little lottery giveaways? You know,
Lotteries.
I asked for a $250,000 grant for a tiny hovercraft to go to Salt Spring.
I want to tell you something, Jack. Some of the things you've done on this program where you've pointed out areas where somebody's suffering. I think you had one where there was
it's a news hour, actually. A blind team.
Disabled team to go. Now, there is no government program to cover those things, but there's an opportunity there to have a chance to respond individually to the needs of people in the communities. It's not something, it's an advantage then to be able to do that.
Independent commission. Independent commission. Small independent commission.
Oh, I'm not going to get another board and commission and more civil. That's the socialist way. Let them, I know he's going to have more boards and more commissions and more people on public expense. I'm going to tell you, if they can't, I'm willing to put our record of how we distribute that on the line every 4 years.
Webster and Premier Bennett after this message. You got a message?
Well, while we're stopped for commercial there, Jack, I was phoned by my Minister of Energy, Jim Hewitt, who, if you ever wanted an example of the double standard and double talk of the NDP, informed me that on April 19th, 1974, the New Democratic Party, as government of that day, approved a permit for uranium exploration to PNC Canada Limited under permit number MX40. That was the Dave Barrett government in 1974. They do one thing as government, they say another, they'll promise anything, and they'll say anything to try and get reelected.
Now, a couple of topics I wanted to get on this. We're going to have to get to the phone sometime. What did you think of Barrett's new ally on the railroad to Alaska? And is that not, in fact, a sound plan if the American government will pay for the railroad from Sumas to Nanena?
I wonder where they've both been for the last 3.5 years, because when we came to government, we saw what Barrett had done. He came to government in 1972, built a railroad which needed agreement to have a final destination, but he never carried on any negotiations with the Americans, so he continued to build a railway to nowhere while he cut off a gas pipeline to somewhere, which is Vancouver Island. Now, we came in, he hadn't carried on any continuing negotiations that I know of. I talked to, we phoned Governor Hammond, and we set up and reactivated annual meetings of the Commissioner of the Yukon and the Government of Alaska to deal with our common needs. Number one, transportation. And the proposed rail connection has been a matter of three major meetings and a number of staff contacts. I have given them all the reports of the BCR, and I've said to them, look, the major advantage now is is for the lower U.S., the lower 48, to connect Alaska. The Americans have got to put their money up front. I'm not going to be left in a position of putting up all the money to suit you. It's to your benefit. Put up the money. Our priorities for this railway first are to develop BC resources, and the next extension of that rail will be into the Sakunka. And we're working now with the federal government and the companies and the BCR to do just that, because you see that we're going to have major coal development. You heard the announcement from Gillespie of BC Coal. We're ready to go, and that's where our priorities are.
But a little gossipy sideline to that. I get the impression that you either snubbed or were snubbed by the Governor of Alaska and the people in Washington State.
No, I wasn't.
Or you ignored that?
No. But the governor, the executive branch, I've been dealing with the governors, not the legislatures. That would be like one of the NDP MLAs, say Bob Skelly from Alberta, inviting the governor of Washington up to visit.
Barrett says if re-elected, he will slap on an extra $1 a ton on coal royalty right now. Surely it would have stood that under your government.
First of all, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He keeps comparing us to Alberta. There is more than royalties. We have a tax on profits that goes on before the regular income taxes. We're getting, by all taxes, in value, in taxation, about $7 a ton for coal right now.
$7?
That's the value of
total value
of all taxation, because that coal is being mined.
No need for an extra $1.
We've got a basic royalty, then we've got a tax on profits. You see, what I want is to keep all mines working. World prices may fluctuate, but I don't want a high base cost so that sometime they're laying off miners because they can't make any money. I want them to continue. And that's the point where government should have that other tax that's flexible, that keeps people working and keeps development going. You know, we saw their philosophy on mining. And we saw what vindictively they drove the industry out of this problem.
Mr. Barrett now says no super royalties. He will deal with each operation on a discretionary basis.
He's saying the worst thing that anyone could say in a democratic government. What government in this country is to lay out by legislation, debate it, the rules and regulations and opportunities for anyone, large companies or small, to develop any part of this province, and that includes mining. What he's saying is he'll disregard the legislature, he'll disregard the rules, he'll make a deal on his terms in his office, and we know how he deals in his office, remember the Egg Marketing Board, and he's saying, and what will be the conditions on which they'll get a license? Will it be because they've donated to the NDP? It will set a scene for the basis for the worst type of payoff that I've ever seen.
That's maybe going a bit too far, Mr. Bennett, but you're saying that ministerial discretion in mining royalties is a disaster.
You could, listen, you could never leave that type of discretion with anyone. The rules and regulations have got to be laid out so the little guy has a chance. What he's saying is only the big that get access to his office need apply, and the little guy who he drove out of mining, because it was the free miner and the exploration guy who wanted to take a chance, like you have in this country, to improve himself, will be wiped out completely. Okay. Rather than driven out like
Next
you did
question.
last time.
Pity you didn't pass the Election Expenses Act, isn't it? Before you went into the campaign.
But
how much will people, don't give me the exact figures.
The Election Expenses Act was introduced as part of the budget, and it applies to all parties. It doubly helps the NDP, the Conservatives, and Liberals. We can only deduct in our province then from that just once, but their parties now can deduct both federally and provincially. They now have a double-barreled benefit that we don't have. It's giving them an extra advantage.
Certainly your friends whom you invited to the debate, the BC Federation Kinnaird, haven't taken much part in the campaign, have you? Does that make you suspicious at all?
Kinnaird might be hiding, or perhaps we might say better that he's being hidden, because for January, February, and March, he carried the NDP political debate with rallies around this province, railing against the government, making extreme statements. I remember statements like bloodshed. If he felt that strongly, then he would have accepted my challenge to a TV debate on the essential services, but he couldn't come. And you know why he couldn't come? Because he was trying to tell the people it meant right to work. It didn't mean right to work.
Barrett says yesterday he will amend that act to take the essential services provision out for municipal workers, school workers, and these others.
I heard him before saying he was going to throw the whole act out entirely. Now, I got to tell you, it depends on which day you listen to him when they're talking.
Are you fighting big unions now? Is that your fight?
I'll tell you, Kinnaird might not be here in body, but his actions are here, and they're in the United States, because we have them using a few political labor bosses whose commitment, whose NDP card looms larger in their mind than the commitment to the people who they were elected to help in the job.
What do you mean by United States?
Are running a campaign against this government. Get in their union members.
From the United States.
Here's a letter from Washington, Washington, D.C., the Painters and Allied Trades, spouting the NDP line. It isn't the NDP line. They talk about all of the, about this, our government. They're trying to say that the Bill of Rights we're bringing in would mean right to work.
May I see that?
Yes. And what you've got now is the NDP are so desperate to get elected, they've got not only a few of their friends trying to bludgeon the union worker in this province to vote for them through fear and misinformation.
Is Frank Raftery the general president in the United States of the Painters and Allied Trades?
Yes, and they've even extended that misinformation, and he's supplying what is NDP party propaganda right in that letter.
Dear sisters and brothers, your wages are in danger. When I heard that the so-called Party of BC would introduce a Bill of Rights, including a right-to-work provision.
Now, who would tell them that?
Bill of Rights.
Maybe that's where Mr. Kinnaird's been.
Have you laid to rest this right-to-work caper, do you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you tell me right now that there is nothing in your Bill of Rights or any other aspect which would cause you now in the future, Mr. Premier, to introduce right-to-work?
Absolutely. We're not going to do it. Now.
Hold your breath, sir. Webster and Premier Bennett after this message.
I just want to say one other thing on that, on the union bosses from the States and elsewhere making a deal with the NDP and using their offices to bludgeon their members out of fear and misinformation to vote for the NDP because they've got nothing positive to offer. I wonder what they're going to exact in the way of payment if the NDP got elected. What's the price? And will they emasculate a government so that it can't act, such as Jim Callaghan's government in Britain, so that finally the union people themselves who aren't being served have to vote him out of office?
I must admit that's a bit gross, a letter apparently from Washington, D.C., but I mean, the intent is no different than the letter from a stockbroker or stockbrokers out on the telephone saying folks social credit.
I've got no deal. My deal is with the people of
And you
D.C.
suggest there is a deal between Kinnaird and Barrett?
I suggest that there appears to be a very unusual deal, and I wonder what the price is and what the price would be for BC, and we could look to Britain. You had the Prime Minister there, who is the Labour Party, who finally couldn't even act as Prime Minister. They had him under such control.
But of course I do remember, I've forgotten that one. Barrett yesterday said Fair Employment Practices Act will come back again and only union firms will work on government subcontracts.
Well,
had you slackened that? You had.
Yes, we took it out. I said everybody in British Columbia is a taxpayer. It is their business. They own it. The government business is the public business. Every British Columbian should have a chance then to provide their services or material to the government of British Columbia, and I'll stay with that. And I also want to say that's why we want to encourage British Columbia firms, and that's why we put in a BC preference purchasing policy for not only the government, but Crown corporations. And we did it after we became government because we saw the Barrett government wasn't giving the little business in BC a break. And you know what? The other day in the Okanagan, all of a sudden he announced this as a new NDP policy. He's been leader of the opposition for 3.5 years, and he didn't know we'd already done it.
Are you going to scrap the heroin program if re-elected? Is it going down the drain right now, the compulsory heroin treatment program? I checked out the facts recently, and you do have 44 workers dealing with about 9 patients.
Sure.
It seems to lack drive. Barrett has promised to, Barrett has announced that he will cancel it.
Well,
what is your position on it?
We're not going to cancel it. and nobody could assess at how quickly or how fast that program will develop to provide help for our young
Do you
people.
think the program's been sabotaged?
I don't want to say that because I don't know, but I will say this. Drug addiction and hard drug addiction comes under the federal criminal code. We have no control over then the enforcement of it, the way we dealt with it, but we in British Columbia live with a problem of it. And we want to help our young people. We want treatment for them in a humane and medical way. I don't want them to turn out to be criminals. They need the help of these type of help facilities at a key time in their life when sometimes they can't make their own decision to get off. It's the time you experiment. You know, everybody starts smoking then, they drink.
Well,
and they get into things they can't control.
I've always been an open supporter of that program. This is a very sensitive question, Mr. Bennett, and I must put it to you sensitively. If re-elected, will you tolerate a situation presently seen in the Provincial Court in British Columbia whereby a judge who has been through trials and tribulations with the Judicial Council cannot handle the cases which come in front of him because of his known associations which led to his problem? Can that be tolerated, sir, now or if and when you are re-elected?
We must have confidence in our judicial system. And when the New Democratic Party were government, they changed the legislation that gave the provincial cabinet the power to make such decisions. We've had that under review. I, too, don't want to see a loss of respect for the judicial system. That's our one guarantee as individuals in this province, in this country, of a protection against anything, including government. And we must have the confidence that we have people who are the finest and who, by example, as well as judicial decisions, will give us fair and equitable justice. And I agree with you that we cannot have people whom we don't respect or whom we may feel may not be able to give fair judicial decisions.
Will you amend the Judicial Council Act to give the cabinet authority, and the lawyers will scream like stuck pig?
That's under review right now. I can't say the final conclusion because cabinet hasn't debated it yet.
Well, will such a situation continue to be tolerated if you're elected, as is now existing in Vancouver?
Some of the problems were federal in nature,
I'm excluding the federal scandals, sir.
But Jack, certainly we're going to do everything we can to make sure there's confidence in the system.
Will you take action, sir?
I said we're already taking action because we've got that act, which the NDP passed, under review.
Your calls to Premier. Now, let me a word of caution. Let's skip the good mornings, the hellos, how are you? Are you there? How's the weather and all the rest of it? Premier Bennett is waiting and will tackle your question, whatever it may be, as soon as you're punched up on the air after this break. Mr. Premier, are you going to split up the hydra-headed monster, the BC Hydro, as would seem to be recommended?
Well, look, I set up the legislative committee that had the power for the first time anywhere to look into Crown corporations. And I've always had some personal reservations on the number of things that Hydro was in from the old BC Electric days. It was in running a little railway, it was in industrial land development, others. I said they didn't logically belong to a
Crown Corporation in one
Crown
piece.
Corporation whose mandate is to provide and distribute energy, so sir, there's some logical things to do. I haven't had a chance to read the report in detail yet.
Go ahead to Premier Bennett.
Yes, Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, Teamster rep and working man.
Right.
Social credit man for 20 years.
Right.
I quit it and joined the NDP party.
Question to the Premier.
Okay. Why did the present government of British Columbia, why did they make it illegal for BC Hydro, BC Rail, ICBC, and Workmen's Compensation Board make it illegal for them to negotiate their pension plan?
An amendment to the Pension Act, you mean to negotiate plans for pensioners?
Yeah, they had the right to negotiate their pensions.
I don't know about I can't answer the question. I don't know what it's about.
Can't answer the question. Doesn't know what it's about. Neither do I, as a matter of fact.
I want to say this, though, that it's significant that a number of Teamsters are supporting us, and I understand, and I don't know if it's announced, that the Teamsters who backed the NDP in the last election with support and money, it's my understanding that this time they've withdrawn that support.
Teamsters, I believe, are neutral. I'm sorry, neither of us can help you. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Premier, by 1985, most urban living will be in condominium and townhouse dwellings. What is the present government's legislation or future legislation or your government's ideas towards this?
Well, you're making an assumption that everybody will be urban and living in those type of accommodations. I think there will still be in many parts of the province with the growth that is being engendered by our policies to take people into other parts of the province where development and processing can take place will help to spread out the population rather than concentrate it. And I still think there will be some demand, as we all have, for the traditional single-family dwelling. Now,
my question, sir, is this: what legislation or future legislation is the government planning? As there, in any legislation, there are things to be ironed out. Is your government planning further looking into the Strata Titles Act?
Well, the Strata Titles Act has been amended on a needs basis, and I'm not aware of an additional need, but if there is one.
You'll let the free market take care of the situation.
There's a free market, and what we want to do, though, is not have everybody crowded into areas. We've got a big province, and I want the people to enjoy it and get out and live in it and be a part of it.
Go ahead from Victoria.
Jack.
Yes, ma'am.
The operators, I think I've had 4 of them this morning, have told me that even if you had 100 lines, it would be very hard to get on your program.
Get to the point, ma'am. You're on it.
I know I am, but I've tried over from
Just ask a question.
And this is the first time I've made it. Anyway, now, to Mr. Bennett. Read the budget. I'm very concerned that the budget that was brought down before the announcement of the election is very, very similar to the budget that was promised after the winning of the last election. And a lot of it hasn't been handled.
No, what you have is this is the 4th budget we've brought down. What you saw was, as we have been able to control government spending, and as I say, we have the lowest rate of increase in spending of all governments in Canada, as we have broadened the resource base and production in this province, and the miners have come back and the oil industry's come back, we now get 75% more revenue from our resources than did the NDP in their last year. That means that we can not only maintain and increase services, we can cut taxes to individuals, which is a commitment we always made.
What bothers you, ma'am? What's the specific?
Well, that's one of the things that bothers me. Like, okay, Dentacare was promised,
and it's in our throne speech.
Can we afford Dentacare?
Yes, we can, and it's in a sustainable budget.
Very limited Dentacare.
I want to say that people expected us to be a perfect government and do everything in a single term. First of all, we had a mess to clean up, which we've cleaned up, that was left by the NDP. Secondly, we have proceeded to expand the economy and get development in our resource areas, and we've done that with startling success. And the figures are there and they're available in this election. And because we have people working in oil and gas and forestry and mining, our government now gets 75% more money from resource revenue than did the NDP, and that's how we can cut taxes to individuals, and we're not plunging you into debt like the NDP did. We've got a sustainable budget, and we can do these things.
Fernie, go ahead, please. You told me that 75% increase 3 times, sir. Congratulations. You got it in 3 times.
I may get it in 6 before we're over.
Go ahead from Fernie. Where? Vernon.
Vernon.
Yeah.
For Mr. Premier, 3 questions, and I'll hang up and he can explain.
Right.
I don't know which parties sold out all our hydro. Will you tell me what % of our own power, developing and current in our dams, are sold out of BC or just for BC?
Okay, next question.
I'll answer that question.
Just a minute. I want to be able to hear it because the delay is killing
okay,
me.
sure.
Okay. Now, would you please explain to me about your right-to-work legislation and just tell me exactly the way it is and no con job?
Right. Next one.
The other thing is, how come when the working man pays his mortgage, pays his taxes, and has a little bit of money left over, and then would like to smoke and drink, and he can use the little bit he has left over, they tax him to death?
Okay, I've got all 3 points. Go listen. First question. What proportion of developed power is exported?
The first one is we have no firm power sales for power generated in this province to the United States. We have, in the past, where we've had surplus, sold interruptible power when we had the water. And a few years ago, you saw us pick up $50 million in revenue. Last year, we didn't have the surplus water, so we didn't have power to sell.
No contracted exported power.
No.
We share in the Bonneville system.
Well, we have an intertie. In fact, there are periods when we bring power here.
The man wants you to explain your right to work.
I will tell the man again, because he sounds like a set-up NDP caller. Number one, we're not bringing in right to work, and that's it.
No change.
No, and don't try and confuse essential services, because the Essential Services Act, Jack, is just this. At no time will our government ever allow the hospitals to close and those services withdrawn, or police protection to be withdrawn from your families and your homes, or fire protections, or our children be withdrawn. And it's for reasons of life, health, and safety. And I just say, as a government, it's there.
And
education. And yes, and education. And you know it will always be there. At the same time, the workers in those industries have been guaranteed, now they know where they are, they've been guaranteed extra mediation and opportunity to achieve settlement and fair wages. Now, the NDP has said they would wipe that out, and I want to know to them, Jack Webster, at what time will Dave Barrett and Jim Kinnaird and the rest of them let the hospitals close? If they're going to take away the protection, when will they let them close? When will they let the schools shut down? When will they take away fire protection and police protection from our families? Because I'm not prepared to. And that's the debate I wanted to have with Jim Kinnaird. And I say to the people that work in that industry, you have been protected. And you're not left to the whim of government to legislate you back whenever they feel like it. You have additional mediation and settlement opportunities that protect your right to get fair compensation.
Next question is perfectly simple, and I'll cut it down for your benefit, sir, because you wouldn't know this. You're cutting your sales tax to 4%, except on alcohol.
That's right.
7%.
That's right.
Is that deliberate discrimination against the moderate person who has a moderate drink, or is it merely that you can't do without the hundreds of millions you get out of booze?
That's a tax source. I consider the sales tax to be an involuntary tax. It covers many things that people might consider necessities, the same as income tax and others. You choose to drink and smoke voluntarily, that's a choice. And that's what I call a voluntary tax. Yes, I will, because both of them provide some social cost to us in both medical and in dealing with problems of alcohol abuse. And we need the money to pay for it.
Social credit gives no edge to the boozers. Next call, Linda. Go ahead, please. That's meant as my light-hearted contribution towards a joke, because I personally don't drink. Go ahead, please. I also lie a lot. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Premier.
Good morning.
I have a question about the nuclear power question.
Yes.
The Socrat appointee to BC Hydro, Mr. Bonner, has said that Hydro must begin construction on nuclear power plants, whether people like it or not. And I would just like you to explain that to me.
And I've said no. And I've said no, there'll be no nuclear. And he said it early, and he said it at a time when they were looking at Vancouver Island. And Vancouver Island had no other option because the Barrett government cut off the natural gas pipeline that was proposed prior to 1972 and denied that energy source, didn't proceed with the hydro cable, increased capacity, so they were going to have brownouts and blackouts, and they said if they didn't have these traditional sources, they'd have to provide nuclear over there, and I say it will never happen, and we've taken the action on both the hydro and the gas pipeline to make sure that never happens, and it won't happen in BC.
To make your position crystal clear on nuclear hydro, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Premier, isn't it time you retired Mr. Bonner, therefore, because it's obvious an ardent advocate of nuclear power?
He is not an ardent advocate of nuclear power.
Don't you think it's time he was retired anyway?
The government of British Columbia will use hydro to provide the power and distribute it, but we'll make the decision on what energy is provided. I've got to say, I was surprised to see that Dave Barrett's against nuclear, which we're all concerned about. But the other day he's against hydro. Now he's not going to have any more electricity in the province, no more development of electricity in the province. And you know, what are we going to use? I mean, I guess the next announcement in his election campaign is going to be, his next industrial program will be the establishment of a candle factory.
Or if we could get all you politicians together, sir, we could use wind power. Webster and Premier Bennett after the break. He's a better businessman than Bennett on a couple of grounds. One, the formation of the BC Petroleum Corporation. Two, the fact that you're allowing our natural gas to be sold for less than the Mexican rate. He says he can get 360 a 1,000 cubic feet.
Well, he's not telling the people the truth. Now, he made all these wild statements, and he's made them earlier. He made them on a TV show with an interviewer named Laurier Lapierre. He told Laurier that, and the people of BC, that when they left government, they were getting $1.96 a 1,000 cubic feet. He made other statements about Mexican gas and other things.
Yeah.
I immediately got a hold of the head of the BC Petroleum Corporation, George Lechner, who was appointed by the NDP. George Lechner responded. I have a copy of the letter, but I left it out of my briefcase today, but I can quote it very well. Number one, the price the NDP were getting in natural gas for this province when they left government, and that increase had only just been granted, just as the election was called, was $1.60 Canadian per MCF. We have taken in 3 rate increases that we've got, it's up to $2.55 Canadian. We will get additional before the NEB, and it's the National Energy Board that gets the increases because the federal government took over that in 1974 when we make representation. We'll get an additional increase. We have a representation. We use our Energy Commission. We lay the evidence, and they assess competing power. Now, our Minister of Energy, Jim Hewitt, has challenged Barrett because George Lechner has also, the chairman of the BC Petroleum Corporation, says no agreement exists between the United States and Mexico for any gas at any price, not $3.50, not $3.20, not $3. They were talking with no agreement in the area of $2.80. And Schlesinger from the U.S. has said that when Canada and Mexico negotiate with gas, both will get the same price. Now, Jim Hewitt has offered to donate, I think it's $500 to Dave Barrett's election campaign.
You say Barrett has misled people on the price of Mexican gas. And
there is no agreement. And he said, and Jim Hewitt has said he'll give $500 to Dave Barrett's election campaign if he can show a copy of any agreement.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to know why, pardon me, Bill Bennett isn't man enough to face Dave Barrett head on. Surely he realizes Kinnaird and Bob Williams aren't running for public office.
Well, but they'll control the policies of that party if it ever got back to office, just as Bob Williams ran the last government. And I'll tell you this.
You're a frightened little man.
Not at all. And I want to talk about some experience because the opportunity to debate face-to-face has been there for 3.5 years in the legislature. I'll give you an example of only one debate, the independent schools, where Dave Barrett and his whole caucus fled from the House, and the thundering down the hall was like the sounds of the great buffalo herds running across the prairies.
Did they vote or not?
They ran. They ran and wouldn't debate.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, 2 questions. BCRIC shares.
Right.
Yep.
My husband and I have been born and lived in Vancouver for over 62 years. We will receive 10. Down the street, a family that just came a few years ago, 4 children, 2 adults, they will get their extra shares with the children. Second question, LCB brandy just went up yesterday, 95 cents. Now, brandy is not a luxury drink. It is a medicine. It is purchased by hospitals. And LCB is a Liquor Control Board brandy. Why?
Well, first of all, LCB runs their pricing on cost. That is the price that they have to pay to buy it. And also what has affected many things is, of course, the lower Canadian dollar, which affects many of their product. And they just have an automatic, it's an increase as the cost goes up to them, they increase the cost.
Nothing you can do about the price of brandy.
It's not an increase in taxation. It's that their costs go up, they pass them along. Now, we have the other question on, and I think it was a question on BCRIC. It's to individuals, and everybody that's a Canadian citizen in British Columbia that qualifies can get it, and it's not for years of living here, but it's an opportunity for every British Columbian who's a Canadian to share experience.
You can see how a nice old couple, 62, here all their life, they only get 10 shares. But the newcomers down the street get 4 5s of 20 and 10 is 30.
They're not newcomers, they're Canadians, and I'm a Canadian, and what I want this ownership opportunity for all. They have an additional opportunity to make additional investment in their corporation. If they've, anyway, British Columbia is a good place to live and work, and it probably extends them that opportunity.
Sorry, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Yes, finally. All right, Mr. Webster, please don't cut me off till I'm finished. I have a very sick child who has to go to high school. Now, I used to be able to afford a car to drive her until when McGear raised the rate so that I could not afford to drive my car. Now, After she goes to school, she has to go to physiotherapy at night, right after school. Now I have to go and walk to the school, pick her up.
Are you a single parent, love?
At the hospital, and now the bus rates are so high I can't afford hardly. Now my husband works, we can't. But if I were on welfare, my daughter could take a taxi
She's
to the hospital and back.
Yeah,
depending on income.
Yeah, you should be entitled, depending on your income, to that type of government provision. I'll take a look at your problem on an individual basis because I think it's available for you now.
Ma'am, are you what you might call working poor?
Yes.
Because of the grave illness to your daughter. How old is your daughter?
Scoliosis, and she's...
Hold on, we do this for anyone who was on the program at that time. Take a number, Linda, and we'll check with
We'll
the
help.
social people.
The other thing I want
Let's make that non-political. Do it
it
better
is
when you get a
non-political,
better
but I
way.
want to mention she mentioned auto insurance in there, and first of all, there was a scandal in auto insurance when we became government. They'd suppressed the rates, and the political statements assuring that it would break even or have a small loss were found out to be true. It was a scandal of mismanagement and cover-up.
Wasn't that just a question of bookkeeping, which way they wanted to do it?
Not at all. Not at all. 2 sets of chartered accountants went in there, and I'll tell you, auto insurance is your money in trust when you put up your premium, that they'll have the money to pay an accident if you have a claim, and that money must be there as a reserve against claims.
Mr. Barrett says 540 million revenue reserve, 250 loan to municipalities.
Just a second. Well, first of all, the ICBC money, we have taken the political interference away by appointing an independent board of directors, so that scandal of the largest loss of any company, any time in this country, in that period of time, will never happen again. And they did it when they had a monopoly. They had no competition, and you couldn't drive if you didn't buy from them. And if Dave Barrett says he's a better businessman, I'll tell you, he's got the only game in town. You can't drive a car unless you buy insurance from him. In 2 years, he loses $175 million.
I'm surprised you let the private people back in at all.
I've got to tell you,
the monopoly was a good thing for us.
No. I'll tell you, we let them in, and you have a measure of a right of choice in purchase of auto insurance. And we're introducing an act in the legislature to end discrimination, not by ICBC, but the total auto insurance industry in the purchase of auto insurance. That is for reasons of age, whether you're married, whether you live in Dawson Creek or Vancouver, or whether you're male or female. That will be a first anywhere because it will be a rights legislation against discrimination by anyone who would sell auto insurance in this province.
ICB has been working on this, and this is the one thing on which the both parties have agreed.
That's the one thing that we said is going to extend to everyone. We're not going to tinker with ICBC on it. We asked them to study it because they were paid, they're a Crown agency, but we're going to make it apply to all who would sell auto insurance, and it is something that we initiated, and again, the NDP have said, me too.
Where's this call from? Powell River. Go ahead from Powell River.
I have before me here this morning, good morning, I should say good morning.
Morning.
Daily Colonist of May the 4th, and it's headed up, Barges Better Than Rail Link, Alaska Study. Now, this is something that Mr. Dave Barrett didn't even mention and he must have been aware of. The state of Alaska has been advised that a rail link through BC to Washington State would be excessively costly.
I've seen the report. Mr. Barrett say, Mr. Lothmark's pitch in the program was that as long as it was paid by the U.S. government, we could afford the railroad.
Oh, yes, but I mean to say with a 60% greater cost and the possibility of a raise in gas by the NDP, it certainly wouldn't be a very happy situation.
I don't think you better get Mr. Bennett and I going on the BC Rail, because I've read the Rail Commission, and he doesn't like the way I interpret it.
I've got to say, though, that that's one of the things I've said, why we've negotiated so hard with the Americans, and Dave's finally admitted to you what I've said all along. I've been saying to them, put up your money.
But you didn't admit to me that it's bankrupt. He did.
What? I'm not talking about
the BC Rail.
I'm talking the BC Rail on operating account made a profit this last year.
Mr. Bennett, there's $700 million of real live debt,
yes,
from which not a nickel of interest has been paid.
My friend, we're going to deal with that in our transportation policy as we deal with highways, as we deal with ferries. We give $50 million roughly to the BC ferries. We pay all the capital cost and maintenance on highways. The railway, which wasn't given large land grants like the CPR and the CN to subsidize it in this country, it will need something on government transportation policy so that as an economic tool, it isn't expected to make a profit. You never made a profit off a highway, but the profit comes from the economic development it engendered.
Webster, in a few minutes more with Premier Bennett after this commercial.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Where's the McCarthy?
Premier Bennett.
Mr. Bennett, two questions and then I'll hang up. I'd like to hear your answer on this. Question number one, what about this oil refinery that's supposed to be coming into Merritt? And question number two, what's happening with the Coquihalla from the Merritt end? How come it's not going?
Okay, hang up and we'll get the answers.
Well, first one,
Bennett has promised an oil refinery for Merritt.
Well, when he was governor, he promised one for Surrey, and it never showed up, just like the Toyota plant he promised before becoming governor in '72 never showed up. I can't respond to every single promise he's made. He's made about 9,000 promises in this election, and I can't respond to them all. I don't know on what he bases it. We get the majority of our oil supply from Alberta. They do not provide long-term contracts. We have extra capacity now in refining in the province, and I have no information that would lead me to all of a sudden plunk an oil refinery in the middle of Merritt.
Or anywhere in BC.
But you know, when politicians on a stage in a town during an election campaign, they do and say strange things, and I guess Dave, there was another one of his strange things. The Coquihalla is an additional north-south link for transportation corridor in this province. It will take off the heavy traffic from reduce the heavy traffic on both the Trans-Canada and the Hope-Princeton. And the work has started from the Hope end. We're going to work from that end. It is a project that will take a number of years.
How many years? 10 years?
I think it's 9 years. Nine
How
years.
much a year? You're going to be spending about $20 million a year, or $30 million a year.
No, it isn't it. I think the total cost is...
$250 million.
No, there was a gentleman that made a claim that the road was going to cost an excessive amount, and then he had to apologize when Alec Fraser gave the correct amount. Now, I can't remember offhand, but the fellow was out by about 4 times.
And you started the work from Hope, you haven't started the work from
The contracts
Coquihalla.
have been let, and we're proceeding.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd just like to make a statement first and then ask Mr. Bennett later about what he intends to do.
Carry on.
Pacific Western Airlines has eliminated 79 flight attendant jobs in Vancouver in spite of the commitment they made to your government that they would not export jobs to Alberta. Some of your campaign people are stating that they want to keep BC working and keep unemployment down. Now, what do you intend to do about it? Are you willing to commit yourself?
Well, I've got to tell you, obviously, you haven't really been aware of what we've done. Number one, it is owned by the government of Alberta. We opposed a government taking over ownership of a regional airline. It was done while the Barrett government was in, and I don't think sufficient protest was made at that time. In fact, Dave Barrett took more time gloating, calling him Peter the Red, than he did in assessing the serious consequences it would have for BC, both in the head office and the personnel, and in the routes to the north that would be developed. We opposed it to the CTC as a government. We opposed it legally through the court. When we could not win on this ground, we also, personally, I spoke to Peter Lougheed about it.
But you can't help him with the job.
No, there is a final way I could have done it and get it overturned, the Alberta government's purchase. And that was we appealed directly to the federal cabinet to overrule the CTC decision, and they turned us down. I've said the only avenue left. I've done everything. I've gone to the government of Alberta. Transportation in this country is under the control of the federal government. I'm fighting. They have stolen a BC industry, another government, and that to me is not in the spirit of Canada. Now, I said I would apply to whoever's the next government again to overturn the CTC ruling we fought all the way through.
But you can't help on the 79 jobs that Peter has taken.
I have tried.
We have written to your government regarding this, and we've had no reply.
Well, because it is a federal problem, which we live with, which we have been fighting them to do something about to protect you. And I'll tell you, if that fight had taken place when it first happened, and Dave Barrett hadn't gone around gloating about Peter the Red being a socialist, we might have won it.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Premier, the province of British Columbia is making annual equalization payments of $600 to $700 million per year to Ottawa. A lot of that money seems to be going to Quebec, which is a resource-rich province. Do you, this money should be working in the province of British Columbia
to provide
we've got your
jobs.
question.
Yeah.
What are your
Equalization
views on this subject?
Well, first of all, we don't send the money. Ottawa takes it, and they distribute it. There are 2 provinces making major contributions out of their economy in which the federal government takes money as equalization payments. That's Alberta and British Columbia, and now to a very small degree Ontario.
But sir, you don't object in principle or in detail to equalization payments.
I've said that I support the system of the country because I'm a Canadian, providing a measure of equity to all Canadians. I have challenged at conferences the method by which they have tried to do it over the last 12 years because we've sent hundreds of millions of dollars from British Columbia, for which I want an accounting, because the same provinces are still poor, the same people are still poor, and I want our money, I want to make sure it gets to the people that need it. I don't want it going to feed some bureaucracy somewhere.
That's right. You don't want to go to governments like your father used to say you want to go to people. But the fact remains is,
they take it.
As a premier, you must be committed to equalization payments.
I'm committed to equity in the country for Canadians and trying to work towards that goal. But I'll tell you, I don't send the money. Ottawa takes it.
I have one final question for the premier after this break. A lackluster campaign without sharp focus, and if you don't get your people out, if the crowds stay home, you're dead.
That's right. Our enemy is apathy, and I want our people to get out. And we're working to get them out.
Enough, sir. Your prediction, please, right now. A realistic prediction. You've got 5 seconds.
We're going to hopefully form a majority government in what is a very close race, and I urge the people to come out and vote for a positive government.
And for NDPers who also urge, your vote too counts. It's your decision on Thursday. Tomorrow morning, no election, 9 a.m. precisely.